name is Jonathan Daniel Pryce, also known as Garçon Jon, and I'm a photographer based in London. One of the great things about my job is that there is no typical day, so there's never a chance of becoming bored. You know, my life could look like actually shooting, which is of course what most people think of when they think of a photographer. That could be on set, I could be meeting someone like a politician or an architect or an actor and having a conversation about their life, or I could be looking at a location, so traveling around London or to another city to look at locations for an upcoming shoot. I've been lucky enough to do a few books, so also it could look like sorting photographs, looking through artwork, deciding the text. And then a lot of this job is about meeting people and networking, so a few coffees are in there in the week as well. One thing I learned about myself over the lockdowns and COVID is how important people are and how I'm really driven and motivated by people and having conversations. Of course I had some understanding of that before that hit, but it's when you don't have something that you really recognize that it's important to you. And photography is an interesting career where you could take 5 different photographers and they're all motivated by different things depending on what they shoot, how they shoot, what they shoot with. And for me it's definitely people. That's one of my number one things. My main client base is fashion, so of course a lot of that is about being with people. But yeah, I just love hearing about people's lives, and there's this quote about the camera providing a sort of metaphorical passport into someone else's life, and I've always loved that idea because people really open up and are quite vulnerable in a way that they wouldn't necessarily be if you weren't taking their photograph. Sometimes people ask me what my greatest skills are with this job, and of course you need to know about light, you need to know about the technical equipment, but a larger part actually is about making someone feel at ease, knowing how to talk to someone and creating a nice environment. So I would hope that that's one of the skills, whether it's innate or I've learned it over the years, that I can make people feel comfortable and open up. I'm very happy that travel is a large part of my job because I think it was Diana Freeland that said the eye has to travel. You know, this idea that you're inspired by seeing newness and going to different places. I remember one of the first seasons I ever shot Fashion Week in Milan, and I was probably about 20, and I really didn't travel much as a young person. I hadn't traveled much before then, and I was astounded by the light. There was something that happened when I looked at my camera and what I saw in real life versus what the camera read. It just clicked. And I thought, okay, this is the good stuff. This is where the good light is. Growing up in Scotland, as I'm sure everyone will understand, good light is not one of its number one qualities. A lot of other great things. And so it was astounding the difference I found when I traveled to different places. I studied in New York for a year, another great example of good light. On an overcast day in New York, you will get far better light than an overcast day in the UK. And that really informed my image making, because you go to a new place and you see a tree or a building in a very different way than you would in the UK. And then also the obvious things, meeting people from different backgrounds, having food in different places, seeing landscapes that look entirely different to what you're used to seeing, for lack of a better word, is very inspiring. It just is very inspiring. For about a decade, I consistently did the main fashion week. So that's New York, London, Milan, Paris. And so I traveled a lot and I really became accustomed to seeing these places and understanding how these cities worked. And then right after COVID, I went to Mexico City, and it was as part of a shoot, and then I also did a book launch there because I just released a book before COVID. It really struck me how going to a completely different place was still exciting, and honestly it's the very basic things, the smells, the street food you get there that reminded me of how important travel is in my life. It was the first big job that I'd done after COVID lockdowns. It was just the freshness and the newness that I loved. I definitely forgot about that feeling of what travel provides, and it was nice to be reinvigorated. I was on the tube in London the other day and I looked down the carriage and saw a whole mixture of people from every walk of life. It could have represented every country in the world. And it reminded me of these statistics you read, that when you're in metropolitan areas with a lot of different people, you get almost less friction and more open-minded culture, because you see the differences in people, and that harmony is a viable option when you have lots of different people coming together. And so I think when I started traveling in my 20s, it was that feeling expounded into a larger sense, the feeling that the world is all connected, and that we respect different cultures, and even if you don't understand someone or you disagree with them, you can still like them and live beside them. And yeah, so traveling and seeing the world has been important to me. When I started my career, I got swept up in the wave of street style. So it's this genre that documents interesting people on the street. And of course, Fashion Week was so closely related to that, because it was this world of fascinating people in one industry where clothes was paramount. And so because of doing street style at Fashion Week so frequently, I became known for location work, which I've been quite happy about. So I often get asked to do shoots that it might be for a fashion brand, or maybe it's for a technology company or an alcohol brand, and we're shooting it on location. Therefore, the practical need for me as a photographer to actually be in that place is important. So traveling is a large part of what I do. And yeah, this year I've been to lots of new places. Actually, I was in Marrakesh recently, I was in Bangkok, a few places I'd never been before. And so actually getting to a location to create the artwork, of course, is a big part of it. When I was younger, I made some rookie errors in traveling, and I definitely learned my lesson of the best ways to travel and how not to travel. They really are core fundamentals. So for me, I need to have a checklist. I need to make sure that my bags are packed well in advance, and timekeeping is an important one. I would much prefer to be very early for a flight than even have the sense of the feeling I'm going to miss a plane. So I think traveling well is all about a very simple and stress-free experience. I really love simplicity in my life, where I know where I stand and what's going to happen. So if I'm taking a long flight, that could be something like bringing an eye mask, because you don't know if it will be provided on the plane. Honestly, bottom line, very good luggage. Good wheels that aren't going to squeak, that are going to roll smoothly, that you're going to be able to fit everything in comfortably. And I do try and pack as light as possible, because I don't want to be lugging around huge bags. Of course, that's not always the case with camera equipment, but it's, yeah, about keeping things as smooth and easy as possible. I have to say, very basic, drink lots of water, try not to drink too much on a flight. You know, you want to turn up feeling not too bad. So I think it's, yeah, about taking care of yourself and bringing the few essentials. The key to dressing appropriately for a long trip, I think, is about layers. So I'll have like a lightweight knit that could keep you warm but isn't too hot to be overwhelming. You could also layer that up a couple times, bring 2 sweaters for example. And I like quite practical clothing, so sometimes maybe it's a combat trouser with pockets in the trousers so I can keep little knickknacks in there, and items that can be folded easily as well. I think that's a good one, because if you have a huge coat, it can be hard to know where to put it on the plane. With jet lag, I've heard so many remedies and anecdotes of how you can get through it. I've heard taking your shoes off and putting your bare feet on the soil of the new land. I've tried homeopathic remedies, and I think the main thing is just getting as much sleep as you can, and then trying to adjust as quickly as you can to the new time zone. So if I get off a flight and I need to stay up long, I will force myself to stay up until it's nighttime in the new location. But it's all about taking care of yourself in general, I think. I love that feeling when you get off a plane and you're in a warm climate coming from a colder climate, and you feel the heat as you step out, and you can look across the tarmac and you see a different landscape and maybe the sun setting, and it just feels very different. That in its essence is something that I still get excited about in a very childlike way. You're like, oh, I'm in this new place, what, especially as a photographer, what could I shoot, what I'm going to find here? And yeah, even if I travel a lot in a short space of time, that's usually still there. So for example, I remember in 2019 going to Paris for probably the 30th time that year, and not really even seeing the differences, not seeing the signs, not hearing the accents. And then after COVID, going to Paris and remembering this feeling I'd had just before, and how refreshing it had been, I guess, to have a break, but also the feeling of trying to connect to that inner excitement, you know, inner child that wants to see the wonder of the world, and trying to make sure that it still is within me. Being a photographer is a great excuse to just explore, so I don't necessarily have to have a paid commission job to go looking in a new place or discover a new city. I recently did a job in Marrakesh and had a few extra days, so I went exploring myself. So for example, went to the Medina, had a look around, and that was an interesting experience because I felt a bit of fear and hadn't felt that in a long time. So I had already been told to, maybe if someone gives you directions that they might be trying to get some money from you or watch out, or there's a lot going on, pickpockets. You get that in a lot of cities, obviously. So I was really watching my back in a way that I hadn't done in other cities for a while. And the experience of taking photographs there felt quite different. Like, I really felt the sense of not wanting to be in people's space too much, even though you're all in each other's space, and then after about half an hour of starting to shoot just street photography, just looking, finding interesting spots, good light, I relaxed into it a bit. But in general, I think the camera gives added motivation to go and explore. So if I was perhaps just walking around by myself, I wonder how much I would take that right-hand turn down a street I wouldn't have felt comfortable in. But because I have the camera, there's a bit more motivation to just think, oh, let's see what's down there. There is sometimes a sense of safety being behind the camera because you're perceived as having a purpose, you're there doing something, and yet at the same time, if you're not doing the right behaviors, it can really make you stand out, and people will stop and ask you what you're doing and why you're taking photos. And as I said, I love talking to people, so I'm very happy to have a chat with someone. But if you're really just trying to keep a low profile and you're being stopped constantly, it can be a bit frustrating. But yeah, the camera, it's a bit of a safety blanket actually. A camera can definitely give you confidence on an interpersonal level, I think. There are set communication styles that I have with a subject, so I already know I'm going to ask them certain things in terms of posing or about their life maybe while I'm shooting, and it just makes the whole interaction a bit smoother. So yeah, even if someone is maybe having a bad day or they're a bit difficult or something, the camera definitely can help that process and give me a boost. There is a book called Photographs Not Taken by Aperture, and it's all stories of photographers where they speak about images that they weren't able to capture. And there's been multiple moments in my life where that has happened to me, shots that got away. One thing that sticks in my mind is in my early 20s, I spent quite a lot of time with a man called John Calder. He was a publisher in the UK. He did a lot of really transformative things, both in the publishing industry and in terms of the law, because he was the first publisher of Lady Chastity's Lover, I think, and was very vocal in breaking down laws around censorship laws. And I never took a photograph of him. I never took a photo. I don't really know why, and I've looked back and thought, with the awareness I have now of how limited life can be, I probably would have taken his portrait more, but he's passed, so now that opportunity's gone, and I would have loved to have had a portrait of him. I've become a bit obsessed with serendipity recently. Don't really know what it actually means in terms of practical use in my life, but I notice it a lot when I travel, and it's usually the moments in which I'm not doing anything. Maybe you're a bit bored or you're distracted. One time on the plane earlier this year, I was watching a film, and in the title of the film, the credits came on and it said something rain. And then I looked over at that moment at the passenger beside me's screen, and he was listening to a song called Rain. And I don't know what this means, but those sorts of things happen to me all the time. Of course, could be bias where you're just looking for these things and it means absolutely nothing, but I often have strange moments where a song will play and then in an hour I'll see that song in a film or something like that. And when I travel, I notice it a lot. I googled it once, and apparently it means that you're in the right time at the right place and your life's on the right path, which I like the sound of. But yeah, I think travel opens my eye more to these interesting, anecdotal, serendipitous moments, especially when you meet someone and maybe 10 years down the line they might be a very significant person in your life. There's an idea that your most creative inspiration comes in moments when you're sort of breaking your routine or doing something that feels different, and I do think that can happen to me at times. Thinking about it, they say that, for example, when you're in the shower you get the best ideas. There's a film director who has a shower in his office apparently, and he takes 5 showers a day because that's where he gets all his best ideas. And yeah, I think there's something about travel, your eyes seeing something new, being in a different environment, which sort of opens up a part of your brain that you wouldn't normally have if you're just sitting at a desk or doing the same routine.